Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to crack open the economist's toolkit and really get into how governments try to manage the economy. And we're going to do it using a really powerful visual tool, the ISLM model. So here's the plan. First, we'll get to know our main visual, the ISLM graph. Think of it like a dashboard for the whole economy. Then, we'll look at the two big tools policymakers have, monetary and fiscal policy. And finally, we'll dive into why different economists, the neoclassicals and the Keynesians, have completely different user manuals for these tools. It's a huge debate.
All right, so first things first, let's get familiar with this dashboard. The ISLM model is really just a way to see the entire economy at a glance. What it does is it maps the relationship between two huge things, interest rates and national income.
So the ISLM model is basically a picture of the economy's sweet spot. You've got two main parts. The IS curve, that's all about the goods market. Think of it as the place where investment equals saving. Then you've got the LM curve. That's the money market, where the demand for liquidity, cash, equals the money supply. And the magic happens right where they cross. That's our sweet spot, the point of equilibrium.
And here it is, in action. This graph just illustrates our starting point perfectly. See that point E right in the middle? You can think of that as the economy just humming along in a healthy, balanced state. Now, the whole goal of economic policy is often just to keep us right there, or if things go off the rails, to get us back to that point.
Okay, so how do policymakers actually steer the economy back to that sweet spot? Well, let's look at their first tool, monetary policy. This is the central bank's playground, and it's all about one thing, controlling the amount of money that's flowing through the economy.
So let's paint a picture. Imagine the economy's in a slump. Prices are actually falling, that's deflation, and everything feels sluggish. Growth is grinding to a halt. What can the central bank do? How can they use this tool, monetary policy, to get the engine running again?
Well, the answer is pretty straightforward. They inject more money into the system. It's called expansionary monetary policy. And in our model, on our dashboard, this action shows up as a shift in that LM curve.
Okay, so let's watch this play out right on our dashboard. The central bank pumps up the money supply and boom, you see the LM curve shift over to the right, becoming LM1. So what does that actually mean? It means that at any given level of national income, the interest rate can now be lower. Why? Because there's just more cash floating around the system looking for a home.
Now, the really crucial thing to see here is this new equilibrium point at E1. The policy worked. It successfully pushed the interest rate down from OR to OR1. And because it's now cheaper for businesses to borrow money and invest, that in turn has boosted the entire national income from OY up to OY1. I'd call that a successful intervention.
So let's just trace that chain of events one more time. The central bank increases the money supply. That makes interest rates fall. Lower rates make borrowing cheaper, so investment demand goes up. And all that new investment makes the national income rise. Simple as that. All right, so that's the central bank's lever. But they're not the only ones with a say. There's another huge tool in the kit, fiscal policy. And this one is controlled by the government itself, through its big decisions on spending and taxes. Now, say the economy is in a really serious downturn, maybe even a depression. The government can decide to step in and just start spending more money. We're talking about things like big infrastructure projects, building roads, bridges, which directly pumps up demand for goods and services.
And back on our dashboard, this government spending spree shifts the IS curve to the right. Now, our new equilibrium point, E1, shows that, we achieved our goal of a higher national income. That's great. But notice something different this time? The interest rate has also gone up.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Look at that gap between Y1 and Y2. The initial boost from all that government spending suggested that income could have jumped way higher, all the way to OY2. So, what's holding it back? Why didn't we get all the way there? This happens because of something called crowding out. Think about it. When the government borrows a ton of money to fund its spending, it's competing for the same pool of savings as private companies. This extra demand for loans makes borrowing more expensive for everybody. So that higher interest rate we saw, it actually discourages some private businesses from investing, and that partially cancels out or crowds out the government's initial boost.
Okay, so we've got these two powerful tools, right? Monetary and fiscal policy. But here's where things get really complicated. Economists basically have two completely different user manuals for them. It's a huge debate that really kicked off after the Great Depression, and just how effective you think these tools are depends entirely on which manual you think is right.
Honestly, this is one of the biggest debates in all of economics. On one side, you have the neoclassicals. They kind of imagine the economy as this perfectly oiled machine where prices and wages adjust instantly. In their world, the economy is always at full employment. But then you have the Keynesians, and they look at the real world and say, hold on, things are sticky. Wages and prices are slow to change, which means you can get stuck with high unemployment for a really long time.
And that core belief, whether prices are flexible or sticky, it changes everything. It leads to two totally different pictures of the economy's total capacity, what economists call the aggregate supply curve. For the neoclassicals, since the economy is always at its max, total output is fixed. It's just a vertical line. You can't produce more. But for the Keynesians, if you've got unemployed people, you can increase total output just by getting them back to work. So for them, the curve slopes upward.
So why does this matter so much? Well, let's bring it back to our tools. According to that neoclassical manual, trying to use these tools to boost output is pointless. All an expansionary policy will do is cause prices to rise, in other words, inflation, without creating any real growth. But the Keynesian manual? It says these exact same tools are incredibly effective at pulling a struggling economy out of a slump and boosting both output and employment.
And this brings us right to the crucial question that policymakers are debating literally every single day. I mean, these aren't just graphs in a textbook, right? They guide the real-world decisions that affect your job, the prices you pay, the health of the entire economy. So the final question is for you. Looking at the world around you, which manual do you think we should be using today?